Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their career, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who've been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I am very excited to be interviewing Lori Dubois, who is the owner and chief storyteller at Marketing Troubadour. Welcome, Lori.
Hi, thanks for having me, Kathy. I'm excited.
Well, I'm very excited, and I'm all for a couple reasons. One is, Lori, you're a fellow storyteller. So how fun is this going to be, right? We're going
to storytell.
Storyteller, talking to a storyteller. So this will be super fun. And I met Lori through a mutual friend. And so that's always fun too, is that, this cascading avalanche of networking and meeting people and, anyway. So then I get to hear her story firsthand. We've met before, but I know now we're going to dive deep into her story. So Lori, before we get into what it means to be the chief storyteller at Marketing Troubadour, we need to know a little bit more about you as a youngster and kind of how you grew up, what part of the country, where you were in the birth order in your family, and how you think that kind of shapes you, the geography as well as birth order and, activities and things of that nature.
Okay, sure. Well, I was born in the Chicago area, but just lived there till I was about 4 and then moved to the Denver area. So I call myself a native, although I'm cheating just a little bit, but I've been here a long time and I've seen a lot of changes in the Denver area for sure. So I am the second of 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy. So I always wore that mantle of middle child. I don't know if it's proudly or if it's defiantly, it's kind of like I was a middle child, but I was also the middle girl because it was 3 girls and a boy. So I was the second kid. So I hate to admit this, but I will. I was always that kid that was saying, that's not fair. How come she gets to do that? I don't get to do that. That isn't fair. Why don't I get to do that? And I was probably very annoying as a child. I'm sorry, Mom. But I always wanted to be where the adults were. So if it, like friends came over and like kids go out and play, but I wanted to sit and listen to the adults. So I don't know particularly how that shaped me, but I know that was a recurring theme.
Well, when it's a recurring theme, it'll probably play out in some ways. So I too am a fellow middle. Okay. I have two sisters, and but I don't have that brother at the end. So, but I totally get that that middle child thing about I was the mediator and harmony and adaptability, that kind of a thing. So okay, and then, so what kind of activities did you do as a youngster? Were you into sports, dance, music?
Not into music. I played tennis a lot when I was younger. And this is, before maybe I'm aging myself, but before the age of 99.9% of the population played soccer. That was,
okay. So
I grew up kind of before that all happened. So I've never played soccer, but I'm not very musical. It's kind of funny because my growing up years and school years, I was very academic and I love academia, and I was always like that great student, and I was very focused in math and science. And so it's a little bit hilarious or ironic maybe that I am in marketing, which is somewhat of a creative endeavor, because creative writing was always my least favorite subject. But I considered myself not creative at all because I wasn't good at art and I wasn't good at music.
Wow. Isn't it funny how we have those self-limiting beliefs? And that guides us probably more than the ones that are unlimiting, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay. So are you introvert, extrovert, or the new term I've learned, ambivert?
Oh, ambivert. Haven't heard that one, but I'm totally extrovert. I always think I love those tests and those profiles, the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and all those tests you can take. So I take every one that I can. And I always think I can somehow outsmart the test. And I also believe, I worked for a consulting firm one time who, our boss and some of our trainers really believe that, you know, you've got learned skills and you've got natural talents, and that your personality traits are basically hardwired, but you can, you know, learn other things. And so I am an extrovert through and through. I've taken the Myers-Briggs probably 4 times. Every single time it comes out exactly the same.
That's awesome. Well, I love that you felt like you could outsmart the test. That's super funny. I was wondering though, as a middle child, I'm the same way. I love all those tests. I love the insight that they bring. I never tried to outsmart them as much as I tried to. I guess I was really searching for, well, what is that thing that makes me unique and different? And then when I got put into the different categories, I was like, well, that doesn't make me unique or different. But what I did learn was it did help me with, I guess, how I'm different from others, right? And that,
Yes.
you know, there was no better, it was just different. And how do you understand what you know, is going through someone else's mind? So my oldest sister, she calls herself a flaming extrovert. And so, of course, since she came before me, I was always, you know, comparing myself to her, I think, and looking at that going, well, I'm not that. So what am I? And so I don't know, did you have any of that going on in your
probably maybe the opposite, because my sisters on either side are actually, or were, especially younger, more introverted than me. So I was always, I don't know why this happened. Maybe it has nothing to do with being the middle child, but I was always the one being outspoken or pushing the envelope. And I didn't have that. My sister tells me that I said this, which I don't really remember, so I'm not really sure if it's true. But she said one time that I told somebody that me and my brother were the smart ones in the family.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. I'm not swearing that happened, but, you know, I don't know. And I think, but if you're talking introvert, extrovert, that might be more the case. I think that I was just always more extroverted than a lot of my family. And I think it makes people uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and I really, because my sister was such a flaming extrovert and I was in the middle, which I find I'm in the middle on a lot of tests, but it really was helpful to see such an extreme case of that and understand that, okay, well, she's an outlier almost. So I can't be, you know, where do I want to be? I want to be me, right? And so, but it was really helpful for her and I. We went through it kind of at the same time. And so to really learn that about each other. And oh, by the way, she's married to an introvert. So her understanding my perspective on things really helped her, I think, understand more with her husband. So anyway, yeah, I think those tests are great when you can really talk through, you know, the value and the differences and what's going on and how that's being perceived. Okay, so shifting gears just a little bit on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being a couch potato and 5 being life of the party. Where do you put yourself?
I'm neither a 1 or a 5. I would probably put myself, I don't know, maybe I'd put myself as a 3, maybe a 4. I think I'm funny, but I don't think I'm necessarily fun. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally get it. And then on the risk meter, same scale, 1 to 5, 1 being low risk, high, 5 being the high risk taker. Where do you put yourself?
I might have to be a 2. I'm not a huge risk taker. And some of that I think was like family learned, you know, you don't do certain things. Since I'm an entrepreneur, I might have to give myself a 3 because, you know, just there's some inherent risk taking, right, with being an entrepreneur. So maybe I'll bump myself up.
A 3. Okay. Well, and I love those 2 questions because as we hear your story, we can really get a sense of how that plays out. I think a lot of people sometimes say things like I'm a 3, but really when we hear your story, we're like, oh, well, I'd put you at a 7. But
I don't know, you might bump me down.
But it is about your comfort zone and others, right? And what's this notion of risk and what you might be really comfortable with, again, as a core competency. Maybe you don't see it, but others see and go, wow, I could never do that. So
that's probably true.
So Lori, before we get to how did I get here, let's talk a little bit about what here is, right? About what it means to be the owner and chief storyteller at Marketing Troubadour. And then we'll go back to the how did I get here portion.
Okay, sure. I have a little story, actually, amazingly enough, that why my business name is Marketing Troubadour. So I am a marketing and branding consultant. I tell people that I'm way more of a jack of all trades than I am, dig deep, like I'm a website coder, for example, because I've always, and we'll probably go through that, I've always been interested in knowing everything about, so I am much more a generalist than a specialist, and probably that's played out in some of my jobs. However, I went to grad school to get my master's degree in library and information science, like 10, 12 years ago, I think it was. And in one of my classes, we watched a film, and this film was talking about when human beings were transitioning into written language. So going from oral language into written language. And so this film had a troubadour who was kind of like the traveling minstrel guy, that goes from town to town with his little ukulele or whatever that is. And like I said, I am not musical, so I don't have that piece, but he would go from town to town and like sing songs and basically tell people the news of the day. And that's how he spread the news. And in that moment, I just thought, that is so cool. And I didn't have my own business yet at that point. And I just really liked that idea of the troubadour or the storyteller. So when I started my business, it wasn't even called Marketing Troubadour. It was called Dubois Information. And Marketing Troubadour, the troubadour was going to be my blog. And it ended up just being that idea of story being how we connect is so meaningful that I changed my business name to Marketing Troubadour.
Ah, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that gives us some insight into your background, as well as then how things kind of evolved for you. So awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit then about how did I get here? So as a young person in junior high school, what did you want to be when you grew up? Was that you mentioned the library information. I mean, was that part of it, or did you have another plan?
Oh, I wanted to be something different every year or every month. I can tell it like it's a funny story now, but I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be I'm thinking back of junior high. I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought being a lawyer would be the coolest job ever. And of course, in my head, I was picturing it, I guess, as being like a litigator and being in the courtroom arguing. So maybe that was it. I wanted to be in that kind of a position of convincing people, like convincing people of what my perception of things should be. So that didn't last very long either, but I remember wanting to be an air traffic controller at a certain point in time. And like I said, I was really interested in math and science and not so much in English. And then when I got to high school, I just don't remember, now we've got all these assessments and profiles and ways that we can test kids to see what they're good at, or are they better with data, are they better with ideas, are they better with people? And maybe I don't remember it, but I really don't think we had all of those tests. So I went into high school and even college having no idea. And when I say no idea, like no idea what I wanted to actually be or what kind of, I just knew I wanted to get my degree, I wanted to get a job, and I didn't know what. So my first major, and this is what is so funny, was chemistry. And I would tell people I was going to be a chemical engineer, and I had no idea what a chemical engineer did.
But it sounded good, and it probably stopped the questions, right?
Oh, exactly.
What do you want to be? Oh, I'm going to be chemical engineer. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, then they don't know what to say.
Yeah, exactly. And you always go to like, what was your favorite class in high school? And it might have been because of the teacher or your friends were in the class or whatever that might be, right? Mm-hmm. But still, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, chemistry was all right. I would do that. And then my first chemistry class in college, I thought, oh my God, what am I even doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you didn't remember any assessment tests. Same thing here. I don't remember any counselor talking to me, any guidance. I remember there was a career night at this high school, and I went with my mom. And basically, we went to these different booths, and she went to some, I went to some. And I remember her coming back to me at the end in the middle of saying, so the good news and bad news. The bad news is, we don't make enough money for you to go to college. And the good news is we make too much money for you to go to college, so you can't get financial aid. So basically she was saying, you can't go to college. And neither mom or dad had gone to college. So they weren't really looking at the value of an education either. Like, well, we got to find a way, and there's all these ways you can find it. And then I remember my dad showed up later, and he came back to me and said, I think one of the three of you should go into the military, and I think it should be you. And I'm like, I don't want to go in the military. So yeah, so to me, career night was really scary and weird. And so, yeah, so I didn't really have a good, clean understanding, and I didn't have access to college. So I wasn't going to spend any money on something I didn't know what I was going to get, you know? And so I thought, well, I'll just start working. So anyway.
But, you know, that makes good sense, because I went to, when you mentioned the college night, that reminds me of, I went to a college night with my mom as well. And we walked around looking at all these colleges, and it wasn't even so much, it was more like college night, I guess, not career night, because it was just representatives from different colleges. Mm-hmm. And so my mom strikes up a conversation with some guy from some little private school in Kansas, but the town was not that far from where my mom grew up. So before you know it, the guy has me like applying for a scholarship and all these kind of things. And then that's where I went to college. And I was there one semester majoring in chemistry, you know, thinking, why am I here? What am I what am I even doing? So after one semester, I quit school and I moved home. Now, you know, story continuing, I did go back to college, but, you know, sometimes I think we don't get enough guidance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so different now. I look at my niece and my sister and her husband. I mean, they actually hired a coach to help her with how to put together her essay and how to put together her profile and bio and what she was looking for. And plus she had all these counselors at school. And I'm like, holy cow, there's so many more resources available. And then, yeah, you know, podcasts like this now, there's all this information, right, about how to get started. So, but I guess this is probably maybe too far for someone in junior high or high school to listen to it. I think it would be valuable.
I think it would too, because I think there's this idea, and maybe there's not so much. That's one thing I think that's changed. That's a good thing. Is, I don't know about you, Kathy, but when I was growing up, it was like, it wasn't even so much about what you did. It was who you worked for. It was, you know, it was this idea of finding this company that's going to, quote, take care of you. You know, they have a good pension, all this kind of stuff. Doesn't really matter what you do, but you find this company to take care of you. And this idea that you got one job and you stayed there until you retired, which, I mean, that not happening for me. And I don't know that happens, you know, plus business has changed so much. A lot of times it's just not, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, and how you got into that company was someone you knew.
Yes.
And
yes.
had to demonstrate a really strong work ethic, right? I show up on time, I listen, and I do what I'm told, and all those things. Very different than today's environment, I think, which is, well, I was talking to a recruiter the other day about, you know, hiring project managers even. And she said, well, the project managers we hire need to have industry experience. So you not only can't take transfer, I'm like, because that can be, you know, project management can be so transferable, right? But she's like, no, the companies are really looking for, you know, if it's payment processing, we want something in payment processing. If it's, you know, technology or application development, it's that. I mean, so it was very, very specified. And I was like, wow, okay, what happened to the transferable skills and bringing, you know, some diversity of thought into the program? But anyway, we digress a little bit. So you quit school. So tell us then, did you that, you know, was that a hard conversation to have with the parents? And
I don't know if I can say this, if I'm allowed to say this on air. I'm not going to be cussing, but so I knew immediately I wanted to come home. It's like, why am I in Kansas and why am I going to Chem Lab and, you know, blowing things up? And so I asked my parents if I could come home midway through the semester, like just come home for the weekend. And I really wanted to talk to them. And they, as parents do, I guess, looking back, were so worried and freaked out about like what might be wrong. And so for me, I just thought, well, I'm going to go home and have this conversation of, I want to come home. I don't want to go to school here anymore. And they're thinking all these things like, is she pregnant? Is she on drugs? And so looking back, it was kind of funny because then it's like, no, I just really don't like going to school here. And then it was just this huge relief for them. So it really didn't become a very hard conversation. So that happened. And I came home and I got a job, and it was from a friend of my parents, you know, someone that you knew. And I was working in the accounting department for Aspen Airways, which I think that airline doesn't even exist anymore. And then I decided, my friends are all in college. This isn't very fun. You know, I'm living at home again. I need to go back to college. And so my first major being chemistry, which didn't really work. So now I'm working in this accounts payable department. And the guy who was the controller was telling me how great accounting was as a field. So I went back to college, and my next major was, guess what? Accounting.
Well, what I'm hearing is you're coachable. You're coachable. That you.
Oh, thank you for putting it that way.
Okay, so then did you finish and get an accounting degree?
No, ma'am, I didn't.
Oh, okay, because you probably were coached into something else.
I took accounting for like 3 semesters, and that was actually everything turns out to be a good move, right? Because you end up landing in a place where you're more comfortable, I guess, and you need to be. Because if I was an accountant, it's not that I couldn't do the job. Like I said, math and science, but oh my gosh, to like sit in I have these pictures of, being in a cubicle and crunching numbers all day. And that would just crush my soul. And no offense to the accountants out there, because God bless you, we need all these people doing all the finance and all that stuff, but that is just not my thing. So I changed my major from accounting to teaching, because my best friend was in teaching. So yeah, coachable moment. I like how you framed that for me. And then that lasted for a while. And so I had taken enough business classes and then education classes. Had I stuck it out a little bit longer and gone one more semester, I would have done my student teaching, and I would have been like a high school business teacher, which looking back, that may not have been so bad. But I just got to this point where, when you're 21 or whatever it is, you want to be done. You want to be out. You want to be in the world. So I went to my counselor and I pretty much laid my transcripts on the table, and I'm like, here's what I got. Like, this is what I've taken. What can we call it? What can we make it? What's the fastest way I can graduate from college? And so she kind of went through things, and she's like, oh, you can have a business degree. You can have like with a concentration in office management. And I'm like, sold, done. So I finished and I got my degree in office management, and I actually did work several jobs that were in that field. So that wasn't all bad.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people have this perception that everybody's got it figured out. I know that was mine, is that people know, oh, I'm going to go to this, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, and just march through this plan of life. And what I'm finding with all these podcasts is, no, that's not the case at all. But even with you in college, I loved how you have shifted gears so many times, and then you finally just got to a point of, what do I have now? Just tell me what I have and let me get out of here.
Yeah. Well, right, because looking backward, you never know about looking backwards until you're able to do it, right? You see how things make sense, and at the time, there's just so much that you don't know or that doesn't make sense. So you think, it doesn't really, I guess my point would be, it doesn't matter. And for all you career seekers out there, I don't know if this is good advice or poor advice. It's no advice. It's actually no advice. It's just my experience. And that is, your experience, I think, ends up being, I think your education is invaluable. I love, like I said, academia. I love education. If you could get 1 million degrees, go for it. But still, your experience, I think, counts for so much more, because I know so many people who have graduated with a degree in X or Y, and they don't do that at all, but it wasn't wasted, but they've gotten into a completely different field and they've gone really far because they've learned on the job.
Yeah. Well, and college helps you learn how to learn. It helps you learn how to be an adult. It helps you learn how to work with people you don't know. Yeah, so there's so many, but the experience of college, I totally get that. And I've seen so many people, same thing. They got a degree in X, and then now they're working in Y. But, a lot of times that degree is what got them in the door, got them that introduction. It got them a relationship that got them an introduction. Yeah. So you just never know where it's going to lead. So very cool. Well, kind of going through your, so what are some of the other jobs that you had then? It sounds like you were in office management business.
I was, and I lived in a small town. I went to Adams State University, which is in southern Colorado, in a small town. And I really liked living in a small town. So I stayed there after, and because of a relationship and things, I didn't move back to the city, back to Denver. I stayed down there. And my first job out of college actually was working for the local newspaper. So I got hired as the classified advertising manager, and I worked for 6 years, actually 6.5 years at this local newspaper.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was fun. That was a fun, I will admit, for being like a first job out of college, that was a fun time. It was a fun job. And that was my first, I guess, foray into the business world, because I was selling ads to business owners. So, I got to go to the local, and I was 23 or something like that, but I got to go to the local Chamber of Commerce meetings, where like all these business owner people were, and I got to know a lot of them. So that was my first really brush with the marketing and the advertising world too. And that was totally not my major. That was just something that I learned as I went. And then I worked for three different architectural firms. And that's just like you mentioned, one thing leads to another. And, if you've got specific experience, maybe a million people could do this job. But if you've actually worked for an architect before, then you have a leg up. And long story short, moved back to Denver, worked for another architectural firm, worked for a management consulting firm. And then finally, after I got my master's degree, my husband, who was very supportive of me at the time, just kept starting these questions like, so when are you going to use your degree? So when are you going to use that degree? So what are you going to do with that degree? And I didn't know, to be honest. I had paid a lot of money and gotten this master's degree, and I was mostly just proud of myself for doing it, for getting it. And I realized pretty early on, I wasn't going to work in the library. And we talked about profiles earlier on. The personality profile of most librarians is as much introverted as I am extroverted. Some of the smartest people on the earth, I swear, it's like these people know more information about more things than most of us, but you have to go and literally pull it out of them because they're not wanting to just toot their own horn and talk about it and share. So it's very interesting.
Not expressive in that they're just always putting it out there with the. So what attracted you to that as a master's? And a second follow-up question while you're thinking about that is, why did you think you needed a master's? I mean, when you're on this whole business track, sales, business side, and then all of a sudden library information, that seems so different. It seems like, wow, that's a huge shift. So I can see why your husband was asking the question.
Yes, let's give him credit. There's a few things. I actually knew a person. Maybe this was another coachable one. I knew one other person who had done that years earlier. And it was funny because when I sent my application, so not every university has a master's program in library and information science, as you can imagine, but DU here in Denver has a great one. And so when I was applying, I had already sent my application in, and I was older. I was like in my 40s, and I sent my application in. And then after that, I went to an information session, that most people go to first to find out about what it's about. And she said something about, we really want to know what makes you tick and why you want to do this, just like the question you asked me, Kathy. But she said, what we don't want to hear is things, like, when I was young, I used to visit my local library. And I thought, now, of course, I said library, not library, but in my application, when I was talking about what I wanted to do, I told exactly that same thing about when I was a kid. I remember the walk down Peoria Street, going to the local library. And by the time I was whatever age and I got to go from children's books downstairs to adult books upstairs, I'd probably read every children's book in there. So I was just thinking at that meeting, I'm never going to get in. Like they don't want me. And I did get in, but I think part of it really is this love of books and this love of stories. But the part that was missing was the interaction with people part, you know. And the reason, to answer your question about I was on this business track, but I was very aware that I was on this business track as the secretary, the office administrator, the office manager, the support person, the help person, not the boss.
So even though as office manager, you didn't feel like the boss?
No, because I've worked for such small companies, which I very much enjoy, because then you get to do more things and have your fingers in a lot more things. So there were times where I was the office manager in an office of 3. So it wasn't like I had a huge staff and I didn't feel like I was elevated. And I don't know that that's the whole reason why I got my master's degree. As much as it sounds like I was in a hurry to get out of college, I always just knew I wanted a master's degree. I didn't know that's what it would be in. And for some reason that just sounded good at the time. And it was, to be honest, I got to tell you, I will probably never work in a library, but the skill set I learned in librarian school has been more helpful to me as a marketer than you would imagine.
Wow. Tell us more about that.
So when you think about a librarian, well, most people probably don't think about librarians, right? But if you think about them, they're sitting behind a desk, but they're finding information and they're helping people find information, and they're figuring out like how you can use that information, right? So that's essentially a lot of marketing, is like finding information and using it. And actually the tagline in my first business, Dubois Information, was find it, get it, use it. And so this idea of understanding user behavior, that was a class I took that was actually called user behavior, and trying to figure out, what do people want? How can you help them? What are they looking for? What do they want? And that was really the clincher where I made that connection. It's like understanding user behavior and researching. That's the other big obvious one. There were 6 JDs in my cohort of like 30 people. And I thought, if you're an attorney and you've gotten all these degrees and you're in a practicing attorney, like why in the world would you go to library school? But then I realized for several of them, they were so good at that curiosity thing and that research piece that it was more of a fit than you might think about. So that research piece is also huge.
Yeah. Wow. What's occurring for me right now is this notion of, we think, again, back to our point of, we think we have to have a plan for everything we do, but yet it's the experience that you got out of that degree that has now translated in so many ways for you. The experience of doing research and the experience of curiosity, and then how do you put it all together? And then it's the discipline of finishing. I think there's value in the discipline of finishing something. Because you never know what it's going to lead to. And sometimes it's easy to kind of give up before when it's not easy, or when maybe it's not so interesting. But sometimes it's worth sticking out, and sometimes it's worth changing gears. I get that too. So, wow. Interesting. Yeah. So were you working full-time, getting your master's part-time, or did you quit and go to school to get a master's?
No, I was working full-time. My daughter was in high school, and it was funny because so my daughter's in high school, I go back to grad school. So it was like night classes, and it took 2.5 years, I think. And it was funny because we were like studying together, and I had to ask her questions about research, because here she is in high school learning about research and databases and how you look up all this stuff. So she sometimes was helping me try to figure out, because it's like, oh, write a 20-page essay. It's been a minute since I've done that. You know, so the whole experience was, it was one of my better. Everyone always talks about how they remember college so fondly, and I do too. But my grad school years, I remember a little bit differently, but so rewarding. Plus, when you're older, so if anyone's, you know, stuck, and, you know, when you get in that position when you're going back to school, you have a different perspective. And I always did well in school, and I, you know, skated a little bit and got really good grades. But when I went to grad school, I was paying good money, a lot of money, and I was serious. And it's like, I am not partying, I am not goofing around, you know. And so it's like, I'm going to get straight A's. And I got to tell you, library school is pretty difficult. But I got straight A's. So I was just proud of myself for doing it. So thank you for validating the finishing part, because I think we overlook that sometimes.
Well, yeah. And then think about the left undone, how that would feel. You know, that, oh, I was so close, you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, you always have to put that on there. It didn't really matter because I already, you know, I wasn't going to be a librarian anyway, but, you know, there is that being undone piece. And so I went to college just for my bachelor's after I was in the working world. So I didn't do it the traditional way. So I started at age, 24? And then I was working for a company that had tuition reimbursement. So it was great because it's like having a full ride scholarship, but similar to you, I had a very different level of investment of my time and energy, even though I was getting reimbursed, and I did have to get certain grades or I wouldn't get reimbursed. But when you go back, when you go to school, I think as an adult and you know what you want, it's very different than when you're, well, I'm going to go to college because that's what everybody's doing and it's, you know, paid for, and, you know, it's the experience I'm going to gain. It's like, well, yeah, no, I made sure I got what I needed out of it. So.
Yes. Yeah. Perspective's everything, isn't it?
So kind of bridge for us, if you can, kind of how you got from, you know, earning that master's to where you are today. Did you go back into the workforce in a different way then? Because now you wanted to be the boss, it sounded like, and not, you know, in an entry level or in a support role. I mean, did you have that experience for a while and then you decided to start your own business, or did the business come?
I did. I heard a story from someone else. It's one of the big online teachers. And I remember listening to this story where she was talking about, she knew that moment, you know, she worked for like Tony Robbins or some big name, you know, and like sitting at the table and was basically not even at the table. She was at another side table because she was going to be taking notes for the meeting. And then all the guys come into the meeting. And that was like her pivotal moment where she thought, well, I should be sitting at this table as well. And so I never thought I had one of those stories, but after I heard that, I can so clearly picture the person that I worked for at the time and kind of standing in the doorway. And we'd had a meeting with someone, and we each, same meeting with an outside marketing consultant, as a matter of fact, and we each had a very different takeaway of what happened in that meeting. And I knew I was right. Apparently he knew he was right as well. But he looked at me and he said, you just don't know how to communicate. And I thought in the moment, it's like, buddy, like I do know how to communicate. I read people really well and I get it and I know this stuff. And then I just thought from then on, it was kind of like, you know, you have that moment where you feel like you're a short timer or your time is limited. And it was not too long after I had finished my degree. So all these things I think were kind of moving into place. And so it was somewhat circumstantial. My daughter was graduating from high school, moving to Oregon for college. And it was like a summer that was kind of a buffer, you know? And so I talked to my husband and I said, I want to quit my job, and, you know, here's what it looks like. And I've got this, you know, amount of money that we can fall back on. And, you know, I don't know if I want another job or if I want to start my own business. I don't know what I want to do. He was very supportive. Spent the summer with my daughter, took her to Oregon, came home. This was August of 2008. And in September, the stock market crashed and my cushion was gone like overnight, like literally overnight. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I have to figure it out now, like right now, like before I thought I would. And I had a friend who knew somebody who was a business owner who got a new website and they needed help with their marketing and they needed some content for their website. And so I had coffee with this woman and she became my first client. So it was almost like that decision in the moment of, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to start my own business. And then that was 13 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, because that could have been different if you were looking for a job, or had you gotten another job, or had you wanted to just find a job, you'd have been, no, I'm going this path. That's not something, or maybe you would have done, I'll do this in between, but you're like, no, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So very cool.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned when we were chatting right before the call that sometimes you just fall into something. Would you call that falling into that?
So yeah, I would probably call it that. But in these last few years, I've been actually trying to pay more attention to things that happen. So, because people talk about good luck, or they say, what is it? Something about how they create their good luck, or something like preparedness creates good luck, or some kind of thing like that. I think it's more of recognizing opportunities. Sometimes it feels like it's more subconscious than conscious, but it's like some little something that feels right about something that's an opportunity and you don't really know what it looks like. So going back to our risk factor, maybe I could give myself a credit and bump myself up a little, because that felt very, very risky, because this person then that hired me said, I was honest with her. I don't know. I'm in this transition period. And she said, I don't want to hire you if you're going to be starting this and then stopping it because you get a job. So that also helped me think, okay, if I make this decision, it's a commitment. I have to do it. And so I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And so did it just feel right? I mean, you mentioned taking, business classes. How did you have the marketing side of that? Was it in the business classes that you had the marketing, and because you had been in sales and then working at those other companies, you felt like you had job marketing training as well as the business education? And
it was mostly the experience, and I guess I didn't really mention this, but the jobs that I had as office manager, usually, I think almost all of them, it was like / marketing coordinator. So I learned marketing essentially from the ground up, from selling ads to businesses way back in the day. But then also when I worked in the architectural firms specifically, in the last architectural firm, I was not an office manager. I was a marketing coordinator. So I learned most of my marketing pretty much on the job.
So had a lot of confidence with that skill set. So when she needed what she needed, you felt like you could do it, and you could.
Yeah, I knew I could do it, because that's what I had done. I worked for this management consulting firm, and I was the office manager / marketing person, and then just the marketing person. And it was funny because I was marketing the firm I worked for, but when they got clients who were marketing clients, they wouldn't let me work on them. So we had a guy who was a marketing consultant, and then he said, well, I want Lori's help on this particular client. And it's like, no, she doesn't do that. She does our marketing.
Wow. So, interesting. So maybe another example of you being that, noticing when I'm not in charge, I don't get it.
I don't get to do what I want.
Yeah, I don't get to work on the things I want to work on.
Yeah, I guess there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, so how do I get to be in charge and get to work on what I want? So you get the first client. Did it just start to snowball, or did you do like a lot of entrepreneurs where you get that first, and then there's the lull and the highs and the lows and all of that?
It's still somewhat of a roller coaster. It's really tough to steady that line, to balance that line, consistently, because I've gone from, I did get some steady clients after that, and mostly referrals from people, and literally the things that people say to do. And yes, they're true. You do networking, you join the Chamber of Commerce, you go to leads groups, you do those things, and you essentially meet people and you get clients. And I've made some of the I don't know that you'd call them mistakes, but what a lot of people do, I think, that are solopreneurs when they get started is if you get to the point where you land like a quote unquote big client that takes a lot of your time, you can get a little complacent. Plus they take so much of your time, and then you ride that wave while it lasts. And then when that big client is either over or leaves, then it's more of the panic situation, and you scramble back into this is what I don't want my clients to do. You know, when things are good, you rest on your laurels a little bit and you just do life and do your business because everything is okay. And then when you lose something and it gets slow, then you scramble and you freak out and you try and figure out, how am I going to get a whole bunch of business like right now? So that roller coaster, some of it I think can't be helped. Some of it I think can be helped, which is what I try to help people do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if you can put the right content out there. I was just at a networking event this morning, and the presenter, we each in the group get to present, and she's a videographer. And she was talking about the power of putting video out in your social media, because it can be you out in social media, right? And how important it is for people to get to see you, your nonverbals and all of that stuff. And it's like, almost in a way, the financial investment where your money works for you, your video is working for you, right? And it's,
yes, absolutely.
You say it once, but then video is out there and it's doing it for you. Obviously, as a marketer and brander, it's got to all be aligned, right? It's got to be intentional and with the purpose to it. Yeah, not just some random stuff. So,
yeah.
Well, Lori, gosh, I could talk to you all afternoon I've got all these questions, but we do have to start wrapping up, because I do like to keep these about 45 or 50 minutes.
Sure.
So when you look back on your career, I guess, and your life, what do you think served you best? It can be a personality trait, a habit, a discipline, a strength. What do you think served you best?
I think that being curious and being willing, like I mentioned, the companies I worked for have been small companies. I always want to learn everything. Like when I sold classified advertising, I could have just, typed in my little ads, sent them to the back, but it's like, nope, I wanted to learn how to paste up my own pages, and I wanted to learn how to work in the darkroom, and I wanted to know how the press ran and all those kinds of things, because to me, it feels like there's a certain amount of security, I guess, in being somebody who becomes invaluable to the company because they can't picture being without them. I was always that person. If a new person comes in, I'm training them, or I'm taking them under my wing. So it's just, I don't know that I did this intentionally, but looking back, I can see that I've always made myself useful or valuable to the people, even more than the processes. I think it's the people.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you said that, because, I know I'm stereotyping here, but, you hear the term about the millennials kind of come in and then they move out. And it's either I'm moving up or I'm moving out. And that's, I think, a great example. I think that was my work ethic and philosophy too. And that's our generation, is that, we were taught, because I came in, I think, without a degree initially too. I'm like, well, all these people have degrees. I don't. How do I show my value? And it was about, well, I can do more. What else can you have me do? I can learn that. And well, how does that work? How does it all fit in? Yeah, there's that curiosity piece. So.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because you do become invaluable then, and you don't even know it. That wasn't your intention, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah. Your curiosity, and it probably made you better at selling and putting all the pieces together. And
it can be a little bit of a double-edged sword, I think, at times, because when I look back, there's a little bit to that like with the thing you mentioned with the millennials that I admire, and that is, if they know something is not working, they're more willing to move on. And some of that I admire, because sometimes I look back and I think, wow, in certain situations, why did I stay so long? Like, it was really to the benefit of other people. It was not necessarily to the benefit of me.
Yeah.
And time goes by fast.
Good point there too, because I just realized I just did my 100th episode interview. And one of the things that, thank you, that I said, kind of did serve me or serve my career early on, is I said yes. oh, you want me to do more? Yes. Yeah. I was in that yes mode. And then I realized the lesson was I didn't really negotiate. Well, if I'm doing more and taking on more responsibility, shouldn't I be paid more?
Bingo.
So I just ended up doing more a lot of times and not getting, credit for it. And I know I'm stereotyping again on gender, but I think this happens with women a lot. We end up taking on, why don't we take, Kathy could do that training function. Well, why don't I get paid for this? And you end up doing a lot of unpaid work that, maybe someone else more savvy would have negotiated and said, well, if I'm doing training in addition to my job, isn't that worth a little something? What does that look like? So yeah, I didn't negotiate well, but I go.
That's absolutely true. I mean, women, and it is, and not even stereotyping. I mean, there's a book that's called Women Don't Ask. That's an excellent book. And that's essentially what people have found. It's like men are just more willing to ask. And I don't know if it's that risk thing or it's the confidence thing, or maybe it's all of it combined, but women just don't ask. And so you think you're becoming invaluable to the company. And I think the bottom line is, and maybe this, I don't know, isn't popular to say, but you're never invaluable to the company. Okay. I mean, the company's going to make their decisions based on what the company needs.
Yeah. I remember I had reached the point I was vice president, and I was working on special projects and different things, and I had a role, and then the new boss came in and he asked me to take on another thing in addition to my role. And I remember talking to a colleague about, I think I should ask for, what do I get for this? And so I was really thinking it through, and then I talked to another person who was kind of a trusted confidant, and the one thing he said was, well, you get to keep your job. And I was like, oh, and then I started realizing, well, as being special projects, I kind of was in that role of, ooh, so I never even asked. And maybe it would have been a different answer. I don't know. And so I took that to heart, that, because I trusted this guy's opinion. He's like,
and that may have been real, because you just said special projects. And that's, I will admit, when I was the office administrator or the secretary, my job was way more secure than when I actually gave all that up and went just into a marketing only role, even in the same company. And I said, I'm a little nervous. And she said, I promise you, we will always have a marketing coordinator. And I got laid off a year later. It's like, I should have stayed the dang secretary. I'd still be here.
And I'd be invaluable. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Well, again, great examples. And we do have to kind of keep bringing it to a close here. So last question. Any words of wisdom that really was powerful to you throughout your career, or that you find that you tend to say to other people that you think is really helpful?
I have a favorite quote. I'm pretty sure it's Eleanor Roosevelt, and it's, do one thing every day that scares you. And I have it on my wall. And I think, it's good for life, or it's good for business, but I think being willing to do that thing that scares you, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and if you do the things that are scary, you're going to get to someplace else. Yeah. Well, I am going to challenge your 3 on the risk meter, or your 2 on the risk meter. If that's the quote on your wall, okay. And if that's how you're living your life, I'll take it. Well, Lori, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your story. And I know people are going to be, you never know what people need, what someone needs to hear today. You know what I mean? And they could hear this and go, wow, that's me. Or that, that really resonates, or that's really going to help me maybe have a new idea or be comforted. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much. This was fun. And listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below, and then you'll be alerted to other interviews as they're published. And if you have any questions for me or for Lori, as I'll post Lori's social media on my website, you can find both of us on lifestorycurator.com. And you can post feedback, questions, whatever. And on that note, I guess I'll say to everyone, please stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing those stories. Have a great day.